Beardy and the Beast Media Club.
Ba-da-ba, ba-da-ba. This is a placeholder intro song.
Welcome, everybody, to the Beardy and the Beast Summer of Sequels. In this series, we'll be revisiting the worlds already explored by watching the sequels to films previously discussed. Today, we'll be having a full spoiler conversation regarding 1998's Species 2. Those spoilers will break free to find you out in that world. If you have not yet listened to the discussion of the original film Species, please consider checking it out. A full list of services we're available on can be found at beardyandthebeast.com. My name is Drew, and as always, he's responsible for effing the human race into extinction, Devin.
Death by snoo snoo.
So, Devin, what was the reading on the Geiger counter this time?
I think I have a hot take. I think this was a better movie, but it didn't capitalize on what was in the first one.
I agree, so I don't know how much of a hot take that is.
According to all the reviews.
I mean, I don't think the original Species was all that good. In fact, we tore it a new one.
Yeah.
This one was more cohesive in every way.
Yes.
In fact, I think I enjoyed this one more so than the first.
Yeah, no, overall, I did as well. A lot of the things we talked about in Species, like, well, first of all, we got rid of the psychic.
Mhm.
Apparently, that was just because he wasn't available. I'm fine with that.
Well, instead, they made the alien psychic, which makes sense because it's alien.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of speculated on that, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things that we said, hey, they should probably play with this a bit. They treated Ross's character. I'm a little bit mixed on how they did Ross, but for the most part, they treated the alien more like the original film thought it was doing. It actually treated the alien this way. He actually came across as a hunter, and there was things on the TV about serial killing, and so while they didn't play with it quite as much as I would like, it was definitely pointing in the right direction. It was a little confusing with Patrick. What I would have liked to see was when he Cobain'd himself. There shouldn't have been a trace of Patrick anymore.
That's what I thought they were going to do.
Yeah, because it was, and it felt like that's what they were going to do because he didn't interact near as much after that at first, but it was still too premeditated. The hiding of the bodies and this stuff. It's like, yeah, it kind of would have been nice to have a trail.
I agree. But overall, I like, to quote you, they picked a lane and they stayed in it.
Yes.
So I'm actually kind of forgiving in a lot of the ways of the things that they didn't carry on from the first film simply because they chose a series of components from the first and they just went in that direction and they didn't look back, which was a nice thing.
Yeah, for the most part, I didn't mind that it forgot things from the first film. Like, because really, like, the rats being infected, I think part of it is you'll need it to be familiar with the first one to get some of what they were doing in the second one. Like, we didn't really get the character introduction with Preston, with Laura, because you could tell they assumed you watched the first.
Yeah.
So it would have been nice to have a little something there. That's one of the bigger things. And then just changing the origin of the creature felt a little bit weird to me. Like, that's not how we were told the creature existed. It's not like Venom, which is very clearly what they were going for in the opening there, where basically did become a symbiote, which was not how it was working in the first. It never spread that way. Very specifically, it never spread that way. So that felt a bit out of place to me.
Does that make you Spiderman?
Yes.
that ending scene is a whole lot more sexy now.
The other one that like really kind of I didn't like was having the other astronaut, because he was a carrier for sickle cell anemia. They turned that into a toxin for the creature, which that's not what it was. It was very specifically, no, I'm looking for the best, and there's a genetic defect, so there's no point. You're not the best.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kind of the retcons that like really jumped out at me.
I wouldn't say they're the great choices.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily hate them because, as you so succinctly stated originally, like Species 2 is, as a movie, just a better movie.
Yeah.
Holds up much better. But the fact that it was preceded by the original kind of does put a few requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely seemed like the retconning of the origination of these alien species, especially because they're somehow linked or from the same, like at least evolutional branch of this species. I guess really all they did was they took something that was really complex, made it much more simple, and then for the sake of the story that they were telling in the second.
Yeah.
And I don't think they needed to.
Make it more simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the charms of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Is it was trying something different. And I felt like it almost got rid of too much what they were trying different. But again, overall it ended up being a better film. So it's I don't envy being the person trying to figure out what parts to cut, what parts to keep to move the film forward.
Well, what I like about the first one is that method of invasion, of taking over a planet.
Mm.
We send out our DNA in a transmission, and then they send back a modified version.
Yes.
And it allows them just to infect the planet.
Mm-hmm.
It's as interesting of an invasion story as the one Stargate SG1 timeline, where like the species comes to Earth, and the way that they take over is by greatly extending everybody's lives, but it makes them unable to have children.
Mm.
So sure, it takes 200 years to depopulate the planet, but
you're still doing it.
Yeah, they come with, baskets of trinkets and breads and fine wines, and then by the end of it, they have a planet that's just ripe for the picking, and they don't have any competition for it.
Yeah. Them talking about how far away these aliens came from, because they made it like super far away, like way further away than it was in Species.
Yeah.
And just be like another creature that like crash landed or something is how they figured it happened. It's kind of like, okay, got it. Different origin. So, which is interesting. So I actually thought, and it kind of happened, I got the idea that Eve was going to be a hero.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was going to be a different species.
I thought so too, because of the different origination.
Yeah. So
origin.
So I'm a little disappointed that they didn't go into that. Because I also think, and they kind of did it with Eve. They showed what we saw with Syl, like what we saw as opposed to what they told us in the film, where she's not the baddie. She's just what she is. She had her attachments and she defended the attachment she built. Even though, let's face it, Laura was kind of a dick.
Well, they did. It's one of the follow through lines that they did kind of continue with, at least in the first half of Species into Species 2. Even Syl versus the nature of their alien DNA.
Yeah.
So their humanity versus alienness.
Yeah. Like, I really thought it would have been neat if they did realize that, again, if they were antagonistic, and then all of a sudden you have that weighing of, okay, do we let out this creature that we know is dangerous to fight this other creature where we don't know how dangerous they are? Better the devil you know than the devil you don't type situation. I think they kind of played on it, but didn't really have the time to fully play on it near the end, because that, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure Syl was only out for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
Kind of following through, like, because you mentioned that Laura was a jerk. It seems to me they didn't write Laura's character as Laura. Felt like it was a different character altogether, and then it was just like, oh, we have the same actress on, let's make it Laura.
Yeah, almost. Because I mean, there's none of the chemistry between Laura and Preston.
Mm-hmm. In fact, they seem kind of antagonistic for some reason.
Yes. And it's like, that's fine, but if you're doing that, there should be something explaining why, because they sure as heck weren't at the end of the film. The ethics of what they're doing, which was kind of funny. It's like, I'm glad they addressed it, but it was Preston questioning Laura's ethics, which is kind of a character reversal. Preston's supposed to be the one without the ethics.
In the story that they were telling, it was probably best that it was done that way. It's just Laura, because it's like, how bad are the ethics if Preston is the one questioning it, right?
Yeah.
Given there was no follow through with the characterization of these people from the first film,
Yeah,
you wouldn't get that. And in addition, even if you did follow through, Laura was a completely different mindset in the first.
yeah. But I mean, I guess that's what I'm talking about. It's just like better film.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. It makes perfect sense within the context of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make context. It doesn't make sense in context of feces.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is really why I have to point it out. So, here's a question. Just seeing about how the aliens probably just how they took over. But did it seem odd to you that we knew Syl could give birth, but the other astronaut had, uterus burster? Which I would have been fine with if they didn't have Patrick turn into the same type of alien.
There's two things about that. For the primary host, Patrick was the obvious choice, being the pinnacle of a man that he is. What was her name? The female astronaut.
She became
She became like a uterus burster, but the mating part, like whatever it was interrupted. So we don't actually know like what would have been made of that creature, because the other ones that were impregnated by Patrick were actually giving birth to full-size children.
Well, it's a carryover from Species.
Yeah, but instead of a child coming out, instead it was like Gripper arm that was trying to like eat the husband. I assume it's similar to the offshoot part of the creature that went into the wall that we never saw again.
Yeah, that was weird.
Just, eggs in the school's basement.
Yep.
But what we can assume is like that whatever the infectious creature is, it means there is a mental center to the mass. So whatever that black goop is, sure, it infected the girl, and sure, like some of the blood extraction became like a wall gripper, a wall tentacle or whatever. But the primary drive and intelligence of whatever this creature was instead infected Patrick.
So you're thinking it didn't infect her, and she was literally just more of a carrier for it? Is that your?
I'm thinking whatever was in her is more akin to the blood byproduct that went in the wall than it was the primary unit of this creature.
Okay.
It's the only thing that makes sense. It's not a good explanation, but
yeah. Because the other question that comes up is like, okay, well, if you want to make just a pure blood creature, and clearly, as long as you've just got a male and a female of someone who's infected, essentially, two astronauts could have done it on their way back to Earth.
True.
I mean, they had 3 months?
Oh, yeah, that's a weird time skip, eh?
Yeah, I think it's like 112 days or something. And of course, all the kids were males, which was, how is the species going to propagate that way?
Actually, that's probably the better way to do it. Like, if the DNA is strong enough to be able to take all the primary traits, to assume that they'll be able to create like at least one child a day.
Yeah, that's...
So it'll take, 12 days to take over the planet?
Yeah, that's true. It's just more one of those interesting biological facts. Like, there's got to be a queen in here somewhere. But I mean, I guess a lot of insect species are like that, aren't they?
Well, that's one thing that I found weird. I found it weird that the male creature was bigger than the female creature.
I kind of did, but I get the impression that these weren't supposed to be necessarily like that insect type.
Mm.
So, and the reasoning for this is because in the first species, they talked about finding it with female DNA because it'll likely be more docile because they don't understand the animal kingdom.
Mm.
We don't really have a context. We don't know if it's actually a queen type situation or not.
True.
Though, really, with that being said, with how fast things progress in their biology, it's like, no, having a few females around, even then, they're still probably producing a child every day.
Yeah, I guess at that with these species. Makes me wonder if there is any sex bias to these creatures. So hear me out. In the first one, Syl was created, they chose female, right?
Mhm.
In the second, the most physically fit, like pinnacle human on that ship was Patrick.
Mhm.
So that's probably why it chose Patrick. If instead it was the female astronaut, I think it would have chosen the female astronaut.
Yeah. One thing to bear in mind is like all three of the people in that ship are going to be like top tier human specimens.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying that I don't think I don't think the alien species, whatever this infectious goo is, I don't think it has any sex-based biases.
Yeah.
I just, if given a choice, I think it just makes the choice of the most able creature or vicinity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what makes the rat make sense too.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you think we're gonna get a demon cat?
No, the cat wasn't because the kid was in there.
Yeah.
Like, what was the point of the cat? I was like, oh, they're doing a throwback to the first one. Like,
And
there
they weren't.
was no lead up. No one had a cat.
I know.
What was the cat?
It's called subverting expectations.
We didn't even have the kid eat the cat.
Yeah, that something like that would have been fine too, right? Just something. I'm assuming that this race grows a lot, like this version of the alien grows a lot faster. It still took at least like a month or so.
You know, they addressed it with a throwaway line.
Did they?
Yeah, they even said like it's this long until going into the cocoon phase where they super advanced grow.
Yeah, it just felt like they all hit the cocoon phase at the same time.
Yeah, probably just an error in the filmmaking, right?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Again, overall, like the timeline actually made a lot more sense in this film. Kind of would have been interesting to see. I think I already said this, just to see more of the aftermath of the male alien doing things. But
Mm.
there's also, I don't think they could have in the same way because they decided to make him someone super famous, essentially.
It's all in the deleted scenes, which are all just extended sex scenes, apparently.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's what I was giggling about beforehand. It's like funny trivia fact. Do you know all the deleted scenes were just like Patrick getting on or like assaulting like women on screen for like extended periods of time? And I'm like,
Yeah.
If anything, it was like 5% too long each time.
Yeah. I'm like, horny filmmakers.
Actually, you know what? The having the male alien be bigger than the female alien actually from the works like Geiger's artworks, it's very much like your humanoid creature ish, something very sexual, and it like melds into the environment.
Mhm.
So one of the scenes that they showed, the male creature was like pretty much like open ribcage esque,
Yeah.
surrounding the background behind Eve in her like alien form. So I mean, from the artistic standpoint, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was a very Geiger-esque
Mm.
shot. It was,
Wasn't skulls and trains.
yeah. Well, that was the weird thing too, because like there was like two forms of the male alien,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like, oh, that came from nowhere.
I mean, if you can tell me the biological advantage of being able to split your head into two heads and then protruding tentacle tongue from one of them, what's the other one doing?
Keeping a lookout to make sure no one comes up from behind.
And of all the things to kill Eve,
Yeah.
giving head? Come on.
Right? I'm just like, bite.
I thought she was gonna.
I thought she was going to mess him up. Just insert a joke that I can't say on this.
The yeah, the thing that ends up super bugging me there, like you can have your entire head destroyed, have it grow back. You can be shot. Considering there didn't seem to be any bullet damage around where Eve was, I assume all those automatic weapons were directly hitting her.
Yep.
And all those bullets entered her body. And for her to heal almost immediately, and a extra long tongue in the mouth is what kills her. It was very anticlimactic.
Yeah. It
Should have went mini kaiju. Like there should have been.
Well, they started the fight off so promising.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh yeah, spikes. It's like they wanted to go with the assault type metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
That honestly, I think the first species did that a little bit better, like dealt with that type of situation a bit better.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so I think it just felt like, oh yeah, no, that's what this guy does, as opposed to thinking about how it works.
I mean, he could have been an assaulter the entire time too, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of there. It just didn't play out into how these two creatures, in my mind, should be interacting. Because I'm going to go with what species told us as opposed to what it showed us.
Okay.
Species told us that she was also an assaulty type person. There's not like that a karmic or poetic aspect to that. It's just yep, this is how it be done. As opposed to having, in theory, these two apex predators going at it. Alien versus Predator never doesn't handle it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I mean, they really could, because that's how aliens be.
It's weird for me to like be considering the sex scenes, but they really should have taken time away from like the human sex scenes and then dedicated that to something a little bit more intricate for the alien sex scene.
You couldn't really tell what was happening. Like there's no distinction.
Well, I think that was part of the point, but
yeah,
perhaps it could have been a budgetary thing too. Because at the end of the first one, they even had like the alien creature jumping around in bad CG, but also had like the super long tentacles that were like trying to choke the dude and stuff. Like there was very much a bunch of interaction with the full alien creature, which was much more subdued in the second one, which would have probably been the better choice for the first one too, to be honest.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's not a budgetary thing. From what I read, this film actually had the same budget.
Oh,
and you know, obviously they wouldn't have needed to make a bunch of the assets again. So, but they might have blown it all on the un-Cobain'ing of Patrick, because that was some fantastic CGI.
When I grow up, I want to be un-Cobain'd.
That was another thing, actually. The Cobane scene actually again makes me question why they had Patrick still have his own personality in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I don't think they should have had him keep his own personality.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both agreed on that already, but it's just clearly he was showing remorse with what happened to all of a sudden embracing what happened. Like, it made a little bit more sense with the first ones where he was blacking out. Like the first 3 or 4, he was blacked out. This is the first one that he's, comes to.
Well, they should have made it like a small switch there would have been just making it apparent that it was actually the alien mimicking the mannerisms.
Yes. Not having a conversation with his dad. That actually would have been the perfect place to show that mimicking.
I mean, you could like even have the series of events and the words be the same.
Yeah.
But just make it clear that it's actually an alien that's just mimicking Patrick to manipulate.
That's something I think like the first one did was, I mean, again, probably because it was female versus male, Syl used her wiles
Hmm.
all the time. It added a layer of cunning to how she was acting,
Hmm.
even though, again, I still say it was animalistic and not malicious.
I agree.
Whereas this one here was none of that, and he clearly was malicious. And I also find it really interesting that none of the ladies of the night had that he found ladies of the night with no diseases that were good for reproducing with multiple times. Again, things that feel weird just in context with the first film.
Well, and that's the thing, and that's the prime consideration that we have to make. I mean,
Yeah.
standing by side, I are to this movie just being better in the first.
Yeah.
But because it is a sequel, we do have to compare it to the original. Uh, it's not like it's not like it's a prequel. It's not like you can change things up within context and then kind of like explain it away during the film.
Yeah.
We already have some precedents set in stone, so
And again, they kept pieces of it. Like one of the things that I really liked that carried over from the first film that was like a subtle blink and you miss it type thing. But it was like, how can she drive? It's like, oh, her favorite show is Dukes of Hazzard. I'm like, yep, that checks out with how she was learning in the first film.
mhm.
I really appreciated that. And just didn't get the time to kind of explore that a little bit more, which would have been cool. Yeah, that's honestly a minor thing. Just I would have liked to see more Syl than we did.
I think I mean Eve. I'm actually
Maybe.
wasn't there wasn't there a Species TV show?
I think there's a show like Species.
Hmm.
I mean, I can think of things like V would kind of follow a similar line. I think there was only the 4 Species films, but I have vague. I can kind of picture what I think you're talking about.
Yeah, I could have swore that there was a Species TV show that was released. But yeah, just 4 movies.
Yeah.
Granted, the last one was 2007, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a bad cycle, really. 4 movies in 10 years, especially when they're going to when they're not getting Disney budget.
Oh, 3 and 4 were direct to VHS.
Yeah. So, and I honestly think people didn't get Species, so they didn't go to see Species 2.
Yeah.
So even though it was on the same budget, again, I say it's a better film. I don't care what the user reviews on IMDb say. It just immediately just takes it out of the running when it was already, kind of just considered a success for the first one.
Mm.
I'm just impressed that they actually made more.
Especially when they could have made a Ghosts of Mars too.
Ghost of Mars was a sequel.
Oh yeah, we discussed this, didn't we?
Yeah, we found out that it was a sequel because we're like, I don't get it.
Yeah, it was Escape from New York, right?
Yes, that sounds right.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I actually don't have too much to say about this. There's nothing super artistic about it. So we've already expressed how it fails as a sequel because a lot of things that followed through were not kept for the second film.
Yeah.
Now, out of context, the lack of expanding on our characters, was it Laura and Preston?
Yeah.
And flippin' Gamble?
Mm.
Yeah, you don't need to go super into characters for like enhanced motivations for a movie like this, right?
Right.
Like this is not something that was trying to delve into the motivations of Press, Laura, and Gamble, which means there wasn't a need to really dive into their characters. So that's what helps this movie stand alone. As a standalone, it's fine. But the fact that none of the character traits of Laura and Press followed through, I'm just restating what we've already said. Oh well.
Yeah, I think that just the other continuation that's like is that standalone. Yeah, probably didn't need much more than it was. It's a pretty good creature feature in that regards.
It had everything you could want.
Yeah. again, it's the context of it where species tried to be something different.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't quite succeed as well as it could have, but it was very clear where they were trying to do with it. There just wasn't quite enough of that tone carried through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think one of the places where the film did succeed very well as a sequel, though, was Syl and Eve felt like the same character.
Okay, yeah.
Like I could see that their motivations were essentially the same. We just didn't get to explore Eve in the same way, but you could see the personality traits, the character traits were.
Yeah, we could see the influence of nature, and then the differences from like the environment nurture.
Yeah. So I do think that part was done very well. I do think that, just to kind of go back to the Ghost of Mars, like it shows me Natasha Henstridge, she can act,
Mm-hmm.
unlike what you see in Ghost of Mars. Interesting because I don't think she really does much. It's there, I think, just a bit more of her in the film. I think would have just helped push it up that little bit more, maybe tie it a little bit better to the first. Overall, I don't think I have too much else. Was there anything that jumped out to you as what it did good from carrying over as a sequel? Or
No, I think you covered it pretty good. If I were to have made a Species 2, I probably would have just remade Species 1 with some of the changes that we discussed in the first film.
Mhm.
The stuff that we were dissatisfied, like actually properly playing with the nature of human versus the nature of the alien, and then reflecting that in the characters that are hunting the alien.
Yeah.
And then you do like the stereotyped who's actually the monster.
Yeah.
Is it the scientist up on the hill or is it the vampire zombies, right? Those would have been my choices. So I would have taken like in the production of Species 2, it got to the fork in the road and went with the creature feature way, which is fine. It worked out. I actually enjoyed the film. I don't know if I was bored during the first one, but I was definitely more I guess enthralled, not the right term, but absorbed into Species 2 than I was Species 1.
Well, this one didn't have anything jumping out at me going like, but why? This makes no sense. Like a psychic all of a sudden telling them where everyone is. Like actually, that's a perfect example where this one did it better. They still had a psychic telling them where the threat was, but they still had to hunt.
Yeah.
Again, it did actually play with the who's the real monster a little bit better. A little bit better with Laura when I'm going, it's like, okay, no, you can be the real monster here. So this feels like it's going in the right direction. And I think, much like we said in Species, it's like we were to take elements of both of these and remake Species today, I think we'd have a masterpiece in the genre.
I think so.
These are not the masterpieces. All of the groundwork is there. In the back of my mind makes it goes like, okay, this one wasn't bad. How bad can Species 3 be?
I guess in the rules, right? Like, if the sequel is worse than the original, then the third has promise.
Yeah.
But if the sequel is better than the original, is the third worse?
The third generally has a hard bar to try to hit. I think is the better way to go with that. I mean, there's only 2 Terminator movies. There's only 2 RoboCop movies.
There's only 2 Interview with a Vampire movies. But they made 4 Tremors movies.
Yeah. I know for a fact Die Hard 3 is better than Die Hard 2.
And it's surprising that in like the main continuity, they only made 6 Star Wars movies.
I know, right? I can imagine in a third one that regardless of what lane they go with, even if it is just the creature feature, at least again, it'll probably stick in its lane.
I feel like they'll
the
go
quality
just
might
full.
go down. But...
Yeah, I feel like they're just gonna go full B.
Yeah.
I feel like it's gonna be even more TNA. It's might even get like some dude frontal or like some Dude Butt. They might do
Yeah.
Dude Butt. What year was the third released?
2004, I think I saw.
Oh yeah, 2004. It's definitely got Dude Butt.
Yeah. 2004, and then 2007 for Awakening. The big thing with 3 is it looks like it's mostly completely different cast.
That's really good.
Yeah. It does look like Natasha Henstridge returns. I find it weird. Like, I was reading the trivia, and it's like a lot of them are like just basically disavow this movie. Now,
There's nothing special about it. There's nothing about this movie that makes it great. It just wasn't a waste of my time.
yeah,
There
the
you go.
only one that I can see definitely wanting to like have a reduction in the credit for is Geiger, because they did not do Syl near as well as they did not do Eve near as well as they did Syl.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's probably the only part that I was super dissatisfied with this film. Like, it wasn't about Syl/Eve.
Yeah.
In fact, is more about Patrick, but Patrick wasn't even like a real character.
Yeah.
He was just running around grabbing women's.
Which, I mean, like, it could have been. Just do something interesting with it. And they didn't.
Well, I mean, they could have if they started earlier with trying to bring Eve in with the radiation and stuff.
Yes.
Like, if they started with that earlier.
Yeah.
But instead they had to add like 4 Patrick sex scenes in the first third.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been such a cool concept. How cool of a concept would it be to have, again, it's that idea of like, have them as two actual different species.
Mm-hmm.
And like, kind of do a good version of AVP and just like, how are they both navigating the world and doing what they're trying to do? Right? Like, there's just something about the way,
like having 2 competing apex predators.
Yeah.
And an unsuspecting world.
Yeah. Because again, the way Syl hunted versus the way Patrick hunted were very different. I think there could be an interesting story there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for the record, all of the Species movies are rated about the same in IMDb. So that makes me feel like in Species 3 probably makes me suspect I wouldn't necessarily be disappointed in the other films.
True.
Just when you see that type of consistency. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's my thing. Like, Species 2 is kind of just more generic compared to Species 1. But to your good point, is more cohesive as a film itself than Species 1.
Yeah.
So you win some, you lose some.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's probably the reason for the negative reviews or the less favorable reviews on Species 2 compared to Species. Just because it is that bit more generic.
Well, I mean, Species probably was more like cult following-ish.
Yeah.
Some people like read too much in the characters or project themselves too much on the characters. It's like, oh, Syl is actually a great analog for the beast within us all. And then when they don't go anywhere near that in the second, they're like, this is a terrible movie because it didn't reinforce my preconceived notions of the first.
Yeah. It was a terrible movie that didn't do my preconceived notions of the first. The Craft.
You know what? And I might be kind of skewed here because we did watch The Craft Legacy last week.
Yeah.
And that movie was terrible.
Oh my god, it was so bad. Honestly, watch it. This was not The Craft Legacy.
yeah.
Species 2.
Watch Species 2.
It's pretty decent creature feature.
Yeah. Kind of like, I mean, it's closer to a discount thing.
Still higher than like your general B.
Yeah, true. Honestly, I think out of all 8 of my alien children, the machete was probably only taken to 3 of them.
Yeah, I was actually sitting at about that same spot.
I like what they did. They picked a lane, they stayed in it. I would have preferred if they had reinvented the first.
Yeah.
Taken the interesting concepts and just did that, just do over. That'd have been great. Yeah, I don't have much to say, so I guess, I don't know. Fiend?
We shall fiend.